Aid, which was started in the early 90s, works across several spheres for sustainable and equitable development back in India. And keeping that in mind, we support a lot of projects across education, social justice, women's empowerment, health, and so on. Here, the two local chapters are involved in raising awareness for these issues and also fundraising. So as part of that, we have our teammate Asha program, which is a marathon program. The season starts in April, so we're very close to that. So we have the initial orientation talk on April 3rd, Building for 163 at 2 p.m. If anyone is interested in running, raising funds, becoming fit, and raising awareness for important issues, please do come for the seminar. And then if you're interested, join the program. If not, spread the word. Another thing we do is also invite speakers and activists from India to come and talk to us. And if so, there is a sign-up sheet that's going around. If you're part of MIT, please put your name down. The Aid MIT chapter, we have representatives here, Sanket and Nachiket. They're going to focus a lot on environmental issues this year, and they're going to start meeting regularly. So if you're interested, put your name down. If you're not a student of MIT, Aid Boston meets every Sunday 2 to 4. We meet in building 4253. So you're welcome to the meeting. It's public. It's open to the public, and we discuss a lot of the projects that we support there. So please do put your name down if you're interested. So like I said, one of the things we do is bring back activists from India. So we have more of a one-on-one interaction with them, and we learn from them firsthand. And today we are very lucky to have with us Nityanand Jayaraman. He's an activist, he's a journalist. He spent a few years in the US, a couple of decades ago, 1 decade ago? Yeah. Two, okay. And he's been back in India working on several issues, but mainly focusing on environment-related corporate crime and the political aspect of energy. So he's been working closely on 2 campaigns. The Bhopal campaign, if you're not aware, the Bhopal disaster, which happened in the 1980s, the struggle is still ongoing. He spoke to us about that last year. But today he's going to focus a little bit more on a more recent campaign, the Unilever mercury contamination campaign, which is the contamination itself happened in Kodaikanal in Tamil Nadu. So Niti is going to try and bring the two together and also talk about the effects on the environment which the general paradigm of development has. So, Niti.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm actually, as you said, a writer and a social activist, and I'm part of a voluntary anti-corporate collective in Chennai called Vetiver Collective. We don't campaign in our name, but then there's a lot of campaigns that we support through different groups that are formed by young people who come to the collective. And we encourage formation of new campaign fronts, and then the campaign front either stays alive until the campaign is won or lost, most usually lost. So that's how we've been organizing. We work on a range of social justice issues, and there have been times in the collective when people who come in with their own interests on sexual orientation or labor rights issues. So it's a very broad kind of a social justice platform that we work on from the collective. So, I mean, as a young journalist turning into activism, I basically cut my teeth in the anti-dam movement in Narmada in the early 90s and the Bhopal campaign, the campaign for justice in Bhopal. For those of you who might not be very familiar with it, there was an American multinational called Union Carbide that operated a pesticide factory in Bhopal. There was a massive gas leak in 1984. More than 8,000 people were killed within a week. Till date, close to 27,000 people have succumbed to long-term illnesses. And the factory also left behind a legacy of contamination, which still remains to be cleaned up in Bhopal. During the course of the Bhopal struggle over the last 32 years, there have been a variety of tactics and strategies that have been used. As usual, the adversaries are always twofold. One is a guilty corporation, and the other is the guilty or collusive government at the state level and at the central level. And there have been direct actions. There's been work around shareholder solidarity work with US campuses, primarily in the US because the company was an American company. It is now has been acquired by another American company, which has its own record of notoriety. That is Dow Chemical Company, which manufactured napalm, Agent Orange, silicone breast implants, and herbicides 2,4-D, 2,4-T, etc. Um, so yeah, as I said, I mean, there's been a variety of very innovative tactics that have been used. There's been some success, mostly in stopping bad things from happening. There's not been much success in making good things happen, except for recently when there's a population of about 25,000 people who had been consuming contaminated water because the factory left behind thousands of tons of toxic waste and contaminated soil, which had leached into the groundwater. The people living around these factories, like in America, polluting factories are usually located in communities where economically, politically weaker sections live. It is not very different in India. But more than a class, there's also a caste and a religious angle to it. So the areas around the factory site in Bhopal, populated primarily by working class, lower down the caste ladder, and poor Muslims, about 50-50 Hindu-Muslim population. And because these are people with very little political power and people who have been historically discriminated against, things like clean water take a long time to get there. And so it was in 1990 that it was conclusively established by a Boston laboratory called Citizens Environmental Laboratory that is no longer here. That laboratory established that there was very toxic contaminants in the groundwater. It was not until 2009 that they actually got water. And in 2005, the Supreme Court had already ordered that water must be given immediately. It took 4 more years of campaigning to actually get clean water to the settlements around the factory site. There is still a fight going on for medical rehabilitation, for economic rehabilitation, for compensation, because at the time, immediately after the disaster, within 4 years, the government of India took away the rights of people to argue and fight for themselves for the compensation amount. The survivors of the disaster had approached the American court. The American court sent them back to India saying, India has a well-developed judicial system, and that system must be allowed to stand tall before its own people and the world body in delivering justice to its people. The government of India kind of took over all the rights of the people, saying that the people are children, they can't argue for themselves. And they applied a principle called parens patriae, which means the government becomes the parents, and the survivors become like minors, unable to represent themselves. The government then gets into a secret negotiation with Union Carbide and comes out with a settlement that was 1/6 of what they originally claimed. So they looked at something like $3.3 billion was their original estimate of the amount that they would try and get. They settled for $450 million, which after it has been distributed, came up to an average of about 25,000 rupees per person for a lifelong suffering with illnesses. And that is all they have got out of this. Of course, you need to give a commission to the court registrar, to the court clerk, to the constable, to the judge. And so by the time you get about 15,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees. So that is a kind of a paltry settlement. There's an ongoing battle 32 years down and 32 years into the since the disaster, an ongoing battle also for additional compensation. The toxic waste that had been dumped by Union Carbide, this got nothing to do with the gas disaster. This is waste that is generated as a routine, kind of a byproduct of manufacturing. That has been left behind, that contaminates both the factory site and also surrounding areas. Two very large football-sized ground-sized football is in Indian football, the soccer grounds were dug up, and then they were used as solar evaporation ponds, essentially places where you dump the toxic waste and let it evaporate, and the sludge remains. That area is now currently being constructed upon by poor people. The plastic liner has been removed from that for insulation. Children play there. So it's quite a mess, and that place remains unremediated till date. There is also a battle on with that, where Union Carbide has said we have handed over the factory site. It is not our problem, and the government of India does not know which way to turn. The last we heard in August of 2015, there's a very pretty picture of Prime Minister Modi sitting with about 25 to 30 CEOs, and there's one man with a very wide grin, and he's the CEO of Dow Chemical, a man called Andrew Liveris. And there's a separate photograph where both of them seem extremely happy with each other, shaking hands. And this is Dow Chemical's CEO. What has happened, I mean, is not, the thing is that, as I was telling Kirtana and others, I've been in activism since 1994. And if I were in a corporate job, I would have been fired because there's so few things that you can say that you actually achieved. But in Bhopal, what is really amazing is Dow Chemical had, while acquiring Union Carbide, had not even included the Bhopal liabilities, despite the fact that there's an outstanding criminal case against Union Carbide Corporation, had not even mentioned Bhopal in the acquisition document, making it seem as if Bhopal did not present any kind of a material adverse risk to the shareholders. In 2001, when the company was acquired, we had warned Dow Chemical that it would be a big problem for them. They should not go ahead with the acquisition. The Union Carbide Corporation must be sent to India to face trial. And Dow Chemical ignored that. There was a shareholder who filed a case. That case was dismissed for whatever reason. But and Dow Chemical said, we're going to make India our springboard for covering the Asian market as a manufacturing place they wanted to set up in India. And of course, they had a projection of close to $1 billion, which would be invested in India. It is now 16 years since. They've actually lost money. 20 million is all they've been able to invest. And 2 years ago, they were forced to acknowledge to their shareholders that their plans for India have not taken off. Now, this is very significant. India is not like Taiwan or some small country. It's a huge market. And for a company like Dow Chemical, it's a big blow that you can't enter India. And this is primarily because of the Bhopal campaign and the solidarity, which is very, very, has been extremely effective. Solidarity primarily from American campuses and people over here. So that's the kind of an update about Bhopal. The struggle continues. It is at a kind of a ebb, but then these things go up and down. People are very tired. That is very clear, especially because many of the people who originally were affected are now gone, and the others are very old. There is a band of young people who have come in, but one can get a sense of fatigue in the campaign there. I'll just move to another. So around 2001, as a journalist in 2000, I was invited by a friend of mine who lived in this really beautiful place called Kodaikanal. And this is up in the hills in my home state, Tamil Nadu, which is in the southern coastal state. And Tamil Nadu is usually warmer than this. And we kind of set the temperature so you can get a feel of what it is at home. But Kodaikanal is up in the hills. It's like outside. Very pleasant and very beautiful place. The British used it as a summer getaway. In 1984, there was a company called Chesbrough Ponds Incorporated. And this company had a manufacturing facility in somewhere not too far from here, in a place called Watertown in upstate New York. And this Watertown was in the banks of a river called Black River that emptied into Lake Ontario. And this was a mercury thermometer factory. And in the early, after Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, there was a lot of environmental awareness in America in the 70s. There was also awareness particularly around the Great Lakes, which was very. Let me turn this on. Sorry. There was a lot of awareness in this area, primarily between India and Canada, along the Great Lakes. If we can turn this off, yeah. About about pollutants like mercury and polychlorinated biphenyls, etc. And there was an international joint commission on the Great Lakes between,
Yeah.
between America and between USA and Canada, which went about trying to figure out how to clean up these lakes by eliminating the sources of pollution. Next one. Yeah, so this is where the Lake Ontario, so you have the Black River coming in from there, and you had the factory in Watertown, New York. So in mid-1980s, they decided to clean up, and as part of the cleanup, this particular factory, this mercury thermometer factory, was squeezed out, was environmentally squeezed out, which means the regulations became so stringent that it did not make sense anymore to manufacture there. Because in order to manufacture profitably, you do need to externalize your costs. And one of the key places you externalize it to is, environment, which is a externalization to the larger society. And when that started getting difficult, they shut it down. Lake Ontario was cleaned up. They moved the factory to Kodaikanal. It was a second-hand factory. We had no idea. The company, Chesbrough Ponds, has signed documents to the government of India to avail of what is now the equivalent of a Makyodara. There's a special economic zone. In those days, it was called export-oriented units, which means 100% of what they manufacture will be exported, and they can import everything duty-free. And this was meant to generate foreign exchange. So they availed of all these benefits by declaring to the government of India that they're bringing in state-of-the-art technology. But what they were bringing in instead was second-hand technology that was rejected, that was actually subject to environmental regulation and squeezed out of the American market. Next. So mercury is a very problematic thing. Just as a quick little chemistry thing, it's a metal. It's a toxic metal that can bioaccumulate, which means in the body of the animal, it keeps growing. What goes in doesn't come out. So over a period of time, the amount of mercury in your body increases to potentially lethal levels. So as you grow older, the animal would have more of that toxic chemical. So it's a bioaccumulative toxin. It also magnifies, which means it moves across the food chain, and here it multiplies exponentially. So you can have virtually undetectable levels in the water, and you can have 1,000,000 times higher in the top predators like polar bears or human beings or other carnivorous animals and birds. These are photographs from Minamata, and mercury is essentially a neurotoxin that affects the brain. It also affects the kidneys, and if pregnant mothers are exposed to it, it can affect the fetus as well. So this is the kind of a 3D picture of where the factory is. It actually is located on top of a ridge. The southern side of the ridge is a steep fall with a very special kind of forest called Shola Forest. It's a endemic forest, endemic to that area, to the Palni Hills. And these Shola forests are usually found in association with grasslands. And these forests are great for as water factories. They generate a lot of water. Between the grasslands, which kind of collect the water, send it to the forest. And most of these forests also give birth to at least one river. So this forest over here is called Pamba Shola, and this side is called Bombay Shola. And Pamba Shola has a river called the Pamba River that enters another very large river called Vaigai, which is a source of drinking water and fish. And as I've told you, the mercury kind of bioaccumulates and biomagnifies through the food chain. So sitting over here, the factory over a period of 18 years, from 1984 to 2001. By 1986, it was acquired by Unilever, which is a Anglo-Dutch multinational, a very large company that manufactures Dove soap, Pepsodent. There's a tea called Lipton tea, and a whole range of other detergents and other household products. And over a period of 18 years, they claim to have discharged more than 2 tons of mercury into the environment. The mercury is so toxic that a gram of mercury is sufficient. If I dose a 25-acre lake with a gram of mercury every year, I can wipe out the fish in the lake. That's how toxic it is. So you have about 2 tons of it dispersed primarily through air. So you have low-level dispersion is going all over. So in end of March, this friend of mine who lives across the street from this factory, it's a very pretty place. So when you go to this factory, it doesn't look like a factory. It looks like a place where you want to go for a holiday. And across the street, there's this friend who used to live there. And he called me up and said he went to a scrapyard to purchase a window frame. And in the scrapyard on one corner, there was broken glass thermometers. And he said, okay, it must be coming from this factory. There's mercury lying around. So in December 2000, a friend of mine and I went to do a documentation, both of the scrapyard, but we also climbed into the factory fence from the forest behind and went in there, and they had dumped mercury waste in the areas behind as well, in the forest behind. On March 7th, so it took us about 3 months to organize with the people. On March 7th, we led a march from the scrapyard, which is in a very crowded part of the town, just beneath a church and just above a primary school. And this scrapyard had 7 tons of mercury waste dumped on the ground, had been lying there for 2 years. And we took a march from there to the factory site and managed to shut them down. At that point, they said, no waste, nothing has left the factory. If anything has left, it is not waste. If it is a waste, it is not hazardous. But the next day, the Pollution Control Board, this was a state regulator, environmental regulator, came down, verified. At that time, there was a very upright and a dynamic woman as a leader of the Pollution Control Board. And she ordered closure of the factory, and within 2 weeks, the factory was shut, no electricity. Electricity connection was cut. But, next please. So this again, pictures of next one. More. So, yeah, so we had about 2 tons being discharged and into the forest right behind, which is like a watershed forest that supplies water to a very large area. They had admitted to have discharged about 1.3 tons. A lot of mercury was still left behind in the factory site. And the struggle then after 2001, shutting them down was very easy. What has happened since 2001 over the last 15 years is trying to get them to clean up and trying to get them to compensate their ex-workers. Very few of the ex-workers were actually with us when we took this march. And it was then that they learned that mercury was a problem. And they started looking around to see whether any of the people that had lost their lives when they were working in the factory might have been affected by mercury. So they started collecting oral histories. And at that time, they found that there was something like 11 people who had died prior to that. And most of them were very, very young. There were at least 8 who had died in their 20s and early 30s. A lot of the ones who were very young who had died of kidney failure. They came around asking whether mercury could cause damage to the kidneys. Absolutely. It is there's a kind of it's one of the organs besides the brain that mercury goes and targets. Subsequently, they organized themselves as an association, a welfare association of workers, and began agitating for compensation and medical rehabilitation, much like what the Bhopalis are doing. In 2 years' time, between 2004 and 2006, they tried working with the company, approached the company. The company would have none of it. They completely rejected the possibility that the workers could have been affected. They admitted, because the evidence was there, that mercury had been released into the environment. There was mercury in the lichen, in the moss, in the trees, on the soil, in the water. But somehow all that mercury had gone from the factory to the soil and the trees, bypassing the workers. And so you had a situation where the workers really did not have a way, and the government was not coming forward to help them in any way. And they made the mistake of going to the High Court. The courts are a very dangerous place to go to in India, especially on matters concerning justice, tort issues. And it's very hostile place, one, because you need a very good lawyer, and then you're up against a very strong corporation, and you're up against an extremely dangerous group of people, scientists. Because scientists only have a PhD with them. You need scientists with a backbone as well. Often the PhD is there, but there's no backbone. And so you have very bad science coming from positions of authority. And it becomes an expert issue. And the workers are asked to parade their body as evidence on a regular basis. Extremely humiliating experience. In 2007, the Madras High Court constituted a committee with experts, the dangerous people. And these experts came out and gave a report that said that the company's occupational safety mechanisms were fantastic, and that they followed all laws. And as they claim, if they followed all the laws and if the occupational mercury levels in the factory setting were really maintained at this level. There is no way that exposure could have happened. In the absence of exposure, no effects could have occurred. And the kinds of symptoms that these people are showing could have been because of alcohol abuse or tobacco. These are all been said in the report. And finally, not only do they conclude that no effects have happened, they've said that there is no point in any further study because of the cessation of exposure. 2001 to 2006, 5 years have elapsed since the exposure, since the last exposure, and so there's no point in studying. We have subsequently found out from Australia, from South Africa, that 20, 25 years after exposure has ceased, people have been able to generate data to conclusively establish connections between exposure and health effects. And here that opportunity was sought to be terminated. Fortunately, a quirky judge came to hear the matter, and he said after about in 2011, he said, why isn't the government of India, why isn't it filed any report? Because the government of India is a first defendant. It is a case filed under what is called the writ jurisdiction, which means we allege a violation of fundamental rights. So it is a public interest litigation. It did not seek compensation. It said that my rights have been violated, and the court has extremely wide-ranging powers and can grant a cash component to the affected people, to the plaintiffs as well. So these kinds of cases are usually filed against Union of India, and Union of India had not opened its mouth in 4 years of the court having convened. So in 2011, the court asked the government of India to submit its response. And because the government of India was clueless, they were like, what? And then they constituted a committee of experts. Fortunately, I don't know what happened. It is completely not meant to happen. It is against the script. The committee gave a very strong report saying that, but this committee was very different from the High Court committee. The High Court committee was only medical doctors. This committee had occupational safety engineers. It had medical doctors, occupational safety health experts. And and this committee got together. They visited the factory. They heard for an entire day, they heard the testimonies of workers. The High Court committee, the earlier committee that gave a negative report, looked at 11 people and basically told the workers that you send us your worst affected. Now, the workers are not experts to know which worst affected people is likely to be suffering from mercury-related diseases. So no systematic study was done. And the Government of India Committee, on the other hand, did some, it is not a scientific study, but they went to the factory side, they summoned a whole bunch of documents, they cross-examined, they heard the workers, and they came out with a report that said that workers had been exposed, and many of the exposed workers are showing signs of mercury poisoning. So this is a bit of a turnaround, and all of a sudden there was more kind of strength in this 11-year-old campaign. And in 2011, after this had happened, the company, Unilever, immediately went to the Supreme Court to try and kill this report, saying this report must not be published, must not be shared. We must rely on the Madras High Court Committee report. But fortunately, those efforts were foiled. And then between 2012 and 2015, the court did not even convene a hearing on this matter. It is just left on the wayside. So we decided at that point of time that we will not rely on the court, but we will have to try and open up new ways of fighting this. And so one of the things that we looked at is the possibility of filing a case in United Kingdom where Unilever is headquartered. Whether you win the case or not, getting closer to home always hurts them. Unilever, unlike Dow Chemical, is a very sensitive company. Not a sensible company. It is not sensitive in terms of being sensitive to my pain, but it is sensitive to its own pain. Because it's a consumer products company. It deals in retail products. I can hit them. Dow Chemical, Union Carbide, very difficult to be shamed. Even Unilever cannot be shamed, but its products is always very conscious. It has an $8 billion budget for image management. So it takes that much money for Unilever to actually make itself look good. So without that money, they would not look very good. And so we decided to file, there's a quirky kind of a provision in UK law which allows people to bring cases against their multinationals, your equivalent of alien torts. And so we brought a case over there for damages for workers. The thing is that, in 2008, the Madras High Court told Unilever that they must try and settle with workers. They kind of suggested, why don't you guys settle? Why don't you make our lives easier? Just go settle. And so Unilever, out of its own goodwill, presented a settlement that was rejected outright by workers. Now, these workers are extremely poor. So for them to reject a settlement offer means that they not even have something that a very poor person would consider worthy. And this kind of offers happen when there is a imbalance in the power equation. So you can't expect two unequal partners, two unequal people to engage in a fair negotiation, but that is the kind of a situation it was. What was required was for the workers had to be strengthened, and we were hoping that the UK, the case in the UK would help us do that. It did, because what we heard is that the company's officials immediately landed up at the doorstep of the workers, trying to say, hey, why do you have to go all the way to England? We are Indians. Let's talk it out over here. Let's figure it out. What needs to happen. Not very sincere attempts. And so in 2015, so this case was filed in 2014. In 2015, after having tried for a variety of, we tried all kinds of tricks. Normally as an activist, your key job is to figure out new circus tricks to try and get people to notice you. Because if nobody notices you, you're invisible, and if you're invisible, you're vulnerable. So your entire strength comes from being visible. And so if you notice people jumping and hanging off buildings and stuff like that, these are circus tricks essentially aimed at getting media attention. But $8 billion of image management money, we made no dent in the media, no matter what we did. Short of bearing yourselves, news media like Times of India would not cover. So we had a huge problem. And so it decided that in 2015, we would completely ignore the mainstream media. We have a number of very young people, aged from 17 onwards, who volunteer at the collective. And these kids are extremely in with what's happening in the digital media. So I kept saying, let's try a social media campaign. And the older people, because they themselves cannot participate very actively, people like me, very actively, they kept holding back, saying, no, let's wave flags, we will take marches, we will do this, we will do that. And so finally they were able to prevail, and better sense prevailed, and we decided to go on a social media campaign. And here we, in March of 2015, we did something very small. We are big advocates of what is called lazy campaigning. One, try not to get beaten up when you're doing your campaigning. So you do things in ways in which you don't get beaten up. So all that old style bravado, leave it aside. We gotta figure out ways of doing this without getting hurt. Second, do very little, make it seem as if you've done a lot, so that they actually don't know how much. And right now, I think it's being live streamed. But the honest thing is, if you distribute 10 pamphlets, you probably don't really distribute 1,000 pamphlets. But you distribute 10, take a photograph of it, send it only to the people that matter, the people who ought to be scared, and hope that they believe that this 1,000 pamphlets that have been sent, not just one supermarket that's been picketed, but about 10 supermarkets that have been picketed. We don't lie. We just don't reveal the actual details. And so March, we had a kind of a kiosk set up on the beach near my office. It's called Besant Nagar. And there we had nice, beautiful hearts. And we had a campaign called Have a Heart, Mr. Polman. Mr. Polman is the CEO of Unilever. And Mr. Polman is a very interesting person. He talks about inclusive capitalism. He talks about business as a force for social good. He talks about compassionate capitalism. And if you don't actually know his background as a CEO of Unilever, you could mistake him for Mother Teresa or Pope Francis. And so there is a lot of talk about sustainable development goals, and about how all the products that they are selling. They've currently invested a huge amount, $700 million, 700 crores of rupees. In 700 crores of rupees would be what, 70 million rupees? Yeah. So 70 million rupees. That's okay. 70 million rupees in a campaign that has been launched by Prime Minister Modi, called Swachh Bharat. Swachh Bharat means Clean India campaign. And Clean India is not very different from the Clean America of 1980s. You basically move waste from one place to another. And it moves from places where people who matter live to places where people who don't matter live. So as part of this Clean India campaign, Unilever is also investing a lot of money. What could be the interest? The products of Unilever all have to do with cleaning. So they manufacture Lifebuoy soap, they manufacture Domex for bathrooms, but unfortunately Domex sales are low in India because there are not very many bathrooms. So the first thing to do is to build bathrooms and then provide water, and then you can sell Domex. So Domex is seen as a product for social good. So here consumption and inherently anti-environmental thing is itself converted into an environmental ethic. So there's a new kind of a new phase of corporate social responsibility, where there's another product that Dow Chemical and Unilever have collaborated to save the world. It is part of their global hand washing campaign. Basically, you need to, in India, people use their hands to wipe their backsides after doing the job. And so the campaign is to wash your hands. Wash your hands not just once, but 2 times. So it becomes 2 times as safe, and they get 2 times as rich. But use good soap. So in this, Dow Chemical, which gives a water-soluble polymer, has collaborated with Unilever. And both of them, of course, Mr. Polman, I think, sits on the Dow Chemicals board as well. So Union Carbide to Unilever, there is a certain kind of a seamless connection. So it is these kinds of products that they are investing in and really talking about their social responsibility. So Mr. Paul Polman might be very sincere, but when he's talking about social inclusive capitalism, etc. But what is also interesting is, what is this person with such a commitment to sustainability, environmental care, care for workers, what is this person's response to Kodaikanal? A company that's well within, an area that is well within his scope of influence. There's something good that he can very clearly do. Instead of talking about the Amazon alone, he can also do something over here. It's a small place. It's a small place. The liabilities are very minimal. And so we thought it might be worthwhile to see whether Mr. Polman would like to walk his talk. And so we decided to first launch a thing called Have a Heart, Mr. Polman, to ask him to think with his heart. So very cute hearts, and we got lots of young people to come and hold the hearts, sign up, push a button and send a message to him, which would go in the form of a really tacky, kitsy heart with a message that said, please, do well by Kodaikanal. Close to 200, 250 messages were sent.
This was on Twitter?
No, this was on email.
Oh, this was like...
Yeah. So we had one booth like this, one table set up, and then we had the computer over there. People would come, fill their names, take a selfie, and then send it off to post it on Facebook and things like that. We were just exploring. We wanted to also increase the kind of impact on this. So what we decided is that we went for a couple of shareholders meeting, and again, lazy activism. One person outside, one person inside, one person holding a handwritten sign, standing there saying, something about Unilever, justice for Kodaikanal now, or something really very bland. And there was a person inside who raised a question. The interesting thing is companies like Unilever are very sensitive. And so even this question it was like a bombshell. They kind of overreact for, even small things like this. And so they said, no, we've been trying to look into it. The first time that it was brought to Mr. Polman's notice in 2013, he said that this is a third-party issue, like all good corporations, not our problem. But very quickly he changed. Even within the same response, he kind of said, we're looking into it. In 2015, he made a declaration saying we are very keen on addressing these issues, which is good. But we want to help them be keener, especially bring out the responsibility. Responsibility doesn't come out easily. So you need to help them enable their ability to express the responsibility. So we thought that we would kind of address, of course, the media is not cooperating, so we thought we would address young people, English-speaking young people, because we wanted to cover a global audience. And so we decided to have a kind of a song that we would make, and I'll show you that song, and launch that, and hope that it kind of catches on some public imagination. And based on that, we would convey the message. Our audience was only Polman and only Unilever. It doesn't really matter whether others saw or not, but somehow the message had to get there. So after this, just a moment. So with this song, what we did is linked it to a petition, online petition. We collaborated with a small online campaigning organization called jatka.org. which is set up by a woman from Deepa, a woman from the US, and very young people, all less than 30 years old, very committed. And unlike the larger online petition organizations, they take up a few campaigns, work very closely with the people that they campaign with. And our preference for this was for such a group was so that we could also learn some of the skills of digital campaigning. So they set up a petition. We launched the petition, gave it 5 days time. So in 5 days, the petition got about 5,000 signatures, and then we launched this song. It was made for at a cost of 15,000 rupees, which is about $220. The money was raised locally. All the people who acted in the video are people who are volunteers from the collective, and my daughter, who you will see. The video went completely mental after that. So we'll just have a look at the video, then I'll come back to it. There's no audio. Okay.
Kodaikanal won't step down till you make amends now. This is the story of Kodai's frustration, known to us as the princess of hill stations. Unilever came and left devastation as they exposed the land to contamination. So here's the story. They set up a thermometer factory where workers handle toxic mercury. They dump their waste in the local shrubbery. Now that's some toxic shit. By the way, when they say that the factory was safe and stay, they don't just what about the workers say? What about the polluting the mercury poisoning? It's life threatening, there's kids suffering. Poison in the soil, you don't have a spoil. Your cleanup of the sham, there's poison in the air. You ain't done to the dum. Kodaikanal won't. Kodaikanal won't. Kodaikanal won't step down till you make amends now. Unilever, clean up your mess. Unilever, clean up your mess. Unilever, I say clean up your mess. Clean up your mess, that's right, clean up your mess. Unilever has been hiding behind their fake PSAs and Pepsodent smiles. They wash their hands off Kodai with life boys. There's nothing fair or lovely about this trial, but this is real. Prolonged exposure got many killed. There's children born being seriously ill. The environment is polluted still. Now that's some toxic shit. By the way, when they say that the factory was safe and stay, they don't trust a word of what the workers say. What about the polluting, the mercury poisoning, it's life threatening, there's kids suffering. Poison in the soil, you don't have a spoil. The cleanup was a sham, there's poison in the air. You ain't done to the dum. Kodaikanal won't. Kodaikanal won't step down until you make amends now.
So this video got on last count is about 3.65 million views. A lot of it was shared. So for us, the kind of moment that really changed this was when Nicki Minaj, whose song this is fashioned on, she sang a song called Anaconda, which is a very racy song, and so this song is kind of built on that one. And Nicki Minaj tweeted saying, "Wow," that's all she said, and the number of views just skyrocketed after that. It went completely crazy. So what is interesting is this could have gone either way. I mean, it could have been just a regular video with 200,000 views or something, or it could have gone viral. So that part of it is pure magic. So you have about 14 years of work, and we've had about 6 months of sheer magic. And that magic actually happened because of this. Within 2 days, we had Washington Post calling. Then we had New York Times. We had like Walls, everybody, Financial Times, people that would go there begging them. They were all calling us up and said, "Please call after half an hour, very busy. We got to talk to somebody else." And so it was a grand time for about 20 days. The good thing is that we were well prepared for this. We were not actually expecting, we were hoping for virality. And we said just in the off chance that it becomes popular, we need to be dressed and ready for the party. So we had a lot of information, a very working website, quite well organized, a lot of background information. We also know what Unilever will say. It's a very state company. Their officials don't normally talk to the media. And so What their position would be has been defined. It has been decided in 2001. It's there on the website, and so we also took it and we had prepared a very detailed counter of it. So the next 20 days or so, the $8 billion advertising monster was completely brought down by a 15,000 rupee, video, and we were able to project Kodaikanal into a global stage. And what that did is, on the issue of environment, the government of Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board, which is the regulator, had stopped consulting people and had sat down in secret with Unilever to reduce the standard to which cleanup has to be done. It was done in secret. And we've been petitioning secretary after secretary, the top functionary in the government, the top bureaucrat in the government. Close to 6 secretaries we have met personally and petitioned them, asking them not for a number for the cleanup, but just saying that, clean up to bring in the public in the consultation. Hadn't happened. For 10 years, there was no consultation. 1 week after the video goes viral, they find the need for democracy and they call for a consultation with people. The company comes in for negotiation over the last 6 months, ups and downs. But basically, on the issue of workers' compensation, on 9th of March, they settled with the workers, which is a big kind of a victory, a huge thing, completely unexpected. So that happened on 9th of March, and from the details of the settlement are secret. No guilt has been admitted, which is quite usual for pathological creatures. That admitting guilt or having remorse is something that they are incapable of. But the settlement seems to have been something that the workers are happy with, which is good. The issue of environmental contamination still remains. We have a number of different ideas for that, and don't know how many more years it will take for that. But the company, of course, in its press release after the settlement, has claimed that it has done it as a humanitarian, a goodwill gesture, and has said that this also shows their commitment towards workers' well-being. But it's good that the commitment. It required a viral video for their commitment to come out. So now we'll probably have to think about some other circus item in order to have them behave responsibly on the issue of environment. So that's a story about Kodaikanal. We will have time for some questions later. What I thought I'd do also now is, since I'm talking about corporate crime, the usual way in which we think about corporate crime is where we think about Union Carbide, big dirty factory operating in the third world and then polluting and running away. But there's also another, just a routine way of doing business, the routine shaping of the city. So I come from a coastal city, quite a large city in India, about 8 million people. And just about half an hour ago, I was in a different lecture by Professor Amit Bhaduri, who is a very respected economist from Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. And one of the things that he was talking about is how the earlier finance minister, not the current one, but the one in the previous government, had said that they want to move 60% of India's population. India is primarily a rural country. 60% of India's population into urban centers. And so the urban centers then would need to be fashioned, designed. Whose imagination are these centers being designed after? So when you say we want a beautiful city, beauty is a very subjective word. In whose eyes is it going to be beautiful? So in that shaping of a city and the allocation of spaces for different things, there is a massive politics that is played out. And in this politics, corporations have sometimes a very indirect influence and sometimes a very direct influence. And my city is no exception. I'm sure your city is the same. Chennai is no exception. But what happened is in November, December 2015, there were rains during the rainy season, which is something that usually happens during rainy seasons. And this time the city went under water and stayed underwater for several weeks. The good thing about this floods was that it brought a lot of people out to help each other. And many of us visited our neighbor's house for the first time and saw the insides of their house, partook of their hospitality. A lot of young people went and helped a lot of other people out there. So there's actually the entire relief and rescue and relief effort was a demonstration that anarchy is possible, because the government was nowhere in sight. It was just people, joining together through using internet applications, collaborating with people from Bangalore who had connection to phone and other things, and figuring out how ways in which they can reach people who have not been reached. They can help people who have not been helped. And so it was an amazing, that part of it was amazing. But what was interesting is the other responses to the Chennai floods. The floods happened after we had 3 bouts of rains. The first bout of rain was around the first week of November. And the second one, that's around the Diwali time. The second bout of rains came on November 15th. And the first bout of rains already had covered certain areas underwater, but these areas were places where the poor people live, so it is not considered very important. The second bout of rains took down what is called the IT corridor. It's the information technology area, a place where a lot of the IT companies, the large IT companies, both American, Indian, and various other nationalities, these companies have their offices. And when this went under, there was a lot of, hand-wringing and soul searching that were happening. The third bout of rain was on December 1st, and quite heavy, and over a duration of close to a day. And that equalized the whole city. The entire city was underwater. There was no distinction between the rich and the poor. And, there was a very kind of a chaotic situation that prevailed at that time. So I'll just run you through the presentation where here again, often when you're looking at this floods, there was a person from Voice of America who called up to find out whether this is a result of poor urban planning and corruption, because India is associated with poor planning and corruption. And what is interesting is the Voice of America journalists did not really make a connection between what happened in New York, what is happening in New Orleans, and what's happening in India. It is not because of corruption. You cannot have good urban planning. If you're constructing on a water body, then it does not matter whether you construct it very beautifully or in a very stupid way, whether you take money and construct it or you don't do it, with any bribes. So this is going to talk about how infrastructure and what we call development is the disaster that we have to be worried about. So when the floods happened, the first thing that they said was, it is a natural disaster, right? And whether there is something called natural disaster in a time when the whole issue of whether nature itself is natural is under question, is something that is debatable. The second is you're also looking at a time when the climate is behaving very abnormally. Whether this is a climate change related effect or not, one doesn't know. But the issue is that the rains were not very heavy. The rains were there, they're heavy rains, but the northeast monsoon, which is what we get in Chennai, is an erratic monsoon. Some years it's very good, which means we get enough water. Some years that enough water comes in very few days, which is a problem. Sometimes it gets stretched over several days. But on an average, we will get close to 1,300, 1,200 millimeters of rain, which is quite a good substantial quantity. We get it all in 2 months. The rest of the year is relatively dry. Second, they said is unprecedented rainfall. This is what our Chief Minister said. This is a result of unprecedented rainfall. Now, what is precedented? What do you know to even call it precedented? You're talking about nature on this planet. The planet itself is about 4 billion years old. You have human existence for about 250,000 years. You have about settled human existence for about 10,000 years. And Chennai's rainfall data, patchy as it is about 200 years. In 200 years, you're claiming to predict how nature has behaved over a 4 billion year cycle or 10,000 years of settled human existence. I think that is kind of underestimating the way in which nature behaves. So the unprecedented rains is really not that unprecedented. Even if you look at the recent data, 2005 had as much rainfall as this. 1976 had more rainfall than this. So you have a complete writing off of any human agency causing this disaster. So flooding, again, just to kind of clarify, flooding is a word that is used when water comes into an area that is normally dry, not when water goes to an area that it's meant to. So you don't say your well has flooded, you say your well has filled up. Chennai is subject not just to flooding, but also to rainfall as a shock, but also to cyclones and tsunamis, because it's a coastal a city on a high energy coastline, nothing between us and Singapore. So you have very high velocity winds coming, and we get rammed by cyclones on a regular basis. The third, of course, is what we'll be going through in a month's time, which is the heat wave. It's a shock that happens. So you can't say, oh my God, there was heat in summer. Summer means hot. Rest of the time, hot. Summer means very hot. Rest of the time, it's hot in Chennai. So heat is something that is predictable. You can plan for it because it has happened for so many years. And after that is drought. So after about a few months of heat, you have water scarcity. So if you are looking at a way to protect yourself, you need to figure out a way to protect yourself from all these. And these are the natural shock absorbers. Sand dunes, which rise very high along the coast, prevent salt air from coming in. That allows you to have agriculture on the leeward side. It also prevents salinity intrusion through the underground aquifers, because these sandy dunes are storehouses of fresh water, which kind of form a wall that keeps the salt water away. You have estuaries with mangroves, and again, these are very good for drainage. So you have large, wide estuaries, water drains out very effectively. Also, when you have mangroves, it tends to retard the speed of storm surges. You have tree cover, and you have a vast network of water bodies. So Chennai is a moderately flat place with shallow depressions. And in the past, it's in the floodplains. So in order to settle, they carved out lakes and settled in the upgradient areas of the lakes. And so these lakes are very important. Now what we have is most of the rivers and estuaries are running as sewers. The sand dunes have been flattened to accommodate resorts and tourism infrastructure. The trees are gone to make roads, and most of the water bodies have been converted into engineering colleges that do all the other things. So how did this natural event become a natural disaster? I'm going to focus primarily on what is called encroachments. Encroachments is things that ought not to be because they're either unlicensed or whatever. So these are two kinds of encroachments. Encroachments under human law, the location is the material. As long as it has a license, it is okay. So I can have a building inside the sea. It is not considered an encroachment. If you look at New York, it has been built primarily by reclaiming wetlands. But that is not an encroachment because it's all licensed, it's been done by the government. Then you have encroachments under natural law. These are things that ought not to be in certain places. And here it does not matter whether you have a license. So when Hurricane Sandy came, it did not say, oh, New York is a licensed encroachment. I will take a detour and go hit some other place. So as far as nature is concerned, the license is the material. If you've constructed in the wrong place, you will be hurt. Then there's another distinction to it. You have encroachments. If you look at the natural encroachment under nature's law, you have encroachments that are built in water bodies, which are huge. There is a building called Chennai 1, which houses Tata Consultancy. And these kinds of encroachments will not be disturbed by the state. In fact, that land was given to them, that water was given to them to construct upon. And these kinds of encroachments tend to pose more of a threat to the city because they have the structural strength to divert floodwaters and pose a massive hydrological impediment. These are the Shantytowns, the kind of slums. And these usually come up on the margins of roads, margins of the seaside, margins of rivers. And I don't know if there's any connection between this and the marginalized, but they live at the margins. And these kinds of structures are a threat to themselves. But then they usually lack the structural strength to divert floodwaters and make it go elsewhere. In the first couple of heavy rains, they usually washed out. They come up again after the rains. These will be evicted. These will be evicted. So post 1990s, there's been actually most of the work, most of the quote unquote development in Chennai has happened after 2001, and a bulk of it after the tsunami after 2004. And here there have been successive governments that have wanted to beautify the city. There's a program called Singara Chennai. So they said, when you're beautifying the city, in whose eyes should it be beautiful? And here it was very clear that they were decking up my city for a foreign investor. The foreign investor was a beholder, and the city would kind of become nice for that beholder. And that meant that you could again do very lazy development. Only beautify the places and beautify it in the eyes of the beholder, the places where the beholder will go. So you need a nice swanky looking airport. They built a swanky looking airport which actually leaks and usually falls down. But the airport was spruced up, and then this is a road that comes from the airport into town. So they needed to have at least one flyover. So they were dreaming about this picture. So you can say Chennai is like this. It's got flyovers. So we have a maze of flyovers and all the way up down to the IT corridor. And this entire infrastructure has been, what is coming up over here is the new metro. And interesting thing is this metro goes on an alignment. We have another thing called the elevated rail, MRTS, Mass Rapid Transit System, Transport System, I think it is, MRTS. And that has been constructed along a canal called the Buckingham Canal. It is not because there was a need for some kind of a transportation mobility along that area. It was built there because land is available. So the road is built in a place where, oh, there's land available over there. It doesn't matter whether anybody goes in that road or not. We'll just build a road over here. Toilets are built like that. They're built in places where, so you have a cluster of 3 public toilets in a place because government has an empty plot of land. The people who need to use the toilet are probably 3 kilometers away. So the same way, even these kind of infrastructure have come up, which have kind of had massive consequences, which I'll come to in the next piece. So if you look at the development since 2004, this is a large drinking water reservoir. It used to be an irrigation tank called Chembrambakam in the western part of Chennai. And what you see over here used to be open land and also farming, where the water would flow from here and enter the tank. When you have open land with, say, vegetation or sand, water, when it falls, it usually falls, goes in, and what doesn't get soaked. After it's completely soaked, when it's saturated, the water starts running off. And when you have sandy soil, there's a lot of water that gets absorbed. So you need, if I throw 10 liters of water, 6 or 7 will get absorbed, and only 3 will flow away. If I have concrete, about 9 will flow away. And if I have clay, something in between will flow away. So here we have a large area that is open and that is sandy, not sandy, but it has earth. So the reservoir would take much longer to fill up. And then all of a sudden we have the Hyundai SEZ, a special economic zone for car manufacturing, right up here. I mean, only idiots would build something that is a toxic factory with a paint shop right above your drinking water source. So we drink a little bit of the Hyundai on a daily basis. I come from South Chennai, we get the water from this lake. This is again, so these are big companies, I mean, massive multinationals servicing other massiver multinationals in other countries. And they claim that they don't have money to purchase land. So the government gives them, to invite investment, the government has given away, there's no land to give, so they've given away water body. What you see over here is part of a massive marshland called the Pallikarnai marshland, which used to extend over 50 square kilometers, a massive area, and which was draining about 250 square kilometers of catchment. The catchment area will not change, but the amount of water that the catchment area sends to the reservoir can change if the land use in that area changes. So from open land, if it is constructed, then there's more water flowing from that catchment area for the same amount of rain. And then this catchment will not have the capacity to deal with it. The second thing that changes is whether the water holding area, so the marshland, 50 square kilometer marshland, retains its integrity. This marshland over a period of 30 years has reduced from 50 square kilometers to 5 square kilometers. So you have a small little marshland. How did that happen? So one portion of this has been given off for the Elcott Special Economic Zone, housing companies like Wipro, again Tata's, I keep coming to the same companies, Infosys, and other companies have been given land, have been given water allocated as land to them, and associated development in these areas. So if you look at this chicken's neck kind of a stream, this is a stream that drains such a large area. And the reason why you can have such a small stream draining such a large area is because this retains the water and sends it out very slowly over a long period of time. So during rainy season, this area is where the river meanders. During rainy season, the entire area is flooded or filled. It was not flooded. So it was empty. And now it's filled up. So all of them were underwater. So you had Wipro, which is a very big, extremely socially responsible company that was underwater until the second floor. There was water. They had to have, a ladder set up, take them into the boats, and then evacuate them. Of course, it was seen as a big loss. Now they're finding out ways to drain this water quickly, which means next year, if there's a flood, which will happen, if there are rains and the place gets flooded, which will happen, the water gets drained off very quickly into the canal. But what that does is it might take care of the flooding problem, but it will lead to a drinking water problem in the coming years. So you're dealing with one shock and making yourself vulnerable to another. This is a Marshall, you can go to the next. So these are some old maps. This is a 1970 revenue map in a place that is my favorite bugbear. It's called the Indian Institute of Technology. It's a highly overrated educational institution. And so that institute is set up over here. This is a water body, that's a water body. And in this water body, in this campus, all of a sudden there's a massive land use change. If you look at this blue line is a drainage from that area, also draining these areas. It is all empty. And here there's a water body, another water body. That water body is now filled up with construction. All these places that was empty has now got large buildings. These are all IT buildings. And this area has residential areas. So the entire place has not just changed in terms of its land use. The drainage remains the same. And this is a final drain called the Buckingham Canal, which now has the MRTS line. So Buckingham Canal doesn't exist. This drain remains the same, but does not have a place to go to. And the place that the catchment area has drastically changed in terms of its land use. This is another place in North Chennai. The blue line defines the contours of the boundary of the tank, water body in 1970. There is no water body. And if you see, this is a well laid out kind of a planned area. This is actually a World Bank scheme called ARI scheme or lake scheme, where we actually went and borrowed money from DC to finish our lakes and build housing for the poor. The place was devastated. This is again, we normally talk about Lashkar-e-Taiba's explosion claiming lives. This is the IT explosion claiming lives. So this is Velachery area, which is in a place that has recently grown as a result of the IT boom. And so primarily housing came up, a lot of housing came up and commercial structures came up. So that is the Velachery Lake. And the Velachery Lake is now only this small, but we're working on it. And in a few more years, you will not see it. Next. So that's the same, zoom out of that map. This is again another infrastructure, the MRTS. And this is the train station. Now what is interesting about this map is in the Tamil land use, the traditional land use, you have the water bodies, and on the northern side where you see the red dots, that area is usually called Nattam. Nattam is a residential area. It's been reserved as an area for residential purposes. The down gradient part of the lake is usually reserved for grazing and for agriculture, seasonal agriculture. And in these areas, it is desirable that water comes. They don't see the coming of water as a curse. They see the non-coming of water as a curse. Because the water comes, there is new sediment, and you have better cultivation, you have better fodder for your animals. So our ancestors left that place usually empty because it's not just a dangerous place to build, it is a dangerous place to build, but also because it needs to be empty land so to accommodate your other requirements. But the smart ones in today's world have decided that there's empty land over there, so they've built up massively. Just look at the density of population over there. They're completely gone. This area was devastated, as it should be, because of on also these constructions like the MRTS formed. They were like the roads that they had laid were so high that they were like dams that prevented the water from draining. So you had water come and stay there for 7-8 days. And inside there also, because water has a memory and usually comes back to where it has gone last year. And they found that there were houses over there, water is not going to leave, so it stayed there. For these places, what you can do is better alarm system, better alerting system so that you can save lives and also move your things from, so this is the kind of coping mechanism that people are looking at now. They move essential documents from the ground floor to the first floor. Because you can't change your house. You put your life savings in building in the wrong place. So you really are stuck you're going to be hit again and again and again. Next. This is another information technology, SEZ, Special Economic Zone. So if you look at this side, all the white portions are sandy areas. This is about 15 kilometers from the sea, which means that there used to be sea over here. It's all sandy even now, which is great for recharging water. As a zone, this ought to have been classified as a water recharge zone and left alone. And also, if you look at these tentacles that spread in 3 directions, it means that it drains water from 3 directions. So this place normally would be a very dangerous place to be during monsoons because you have water rushing in from 3 sides. But only after all this is saturated will the water flow through this and then empty into the Buckingham Canal over there. What we did over here, again, my bugbear, Tata Consultancy has constructed another huge building right over there. And another very interesting thing, you have the Chennai Mathematical Institute. That's the most brainy people do the most stupid things. So you constructed this massive infrastructure right on top of a place which services a very large area on that side. So now what happens is not only do these guys get flooded, but they also ensure that somebody else who's very sensible and constructed above will also get flooded because there's no way for the water to flow out. Next. So yeah, I mean, this is a place where I'm working in currently, about 100 kilometers south of Chennai. This is what Chennai would have looked like, say, 120 years ago. And this is what Cheyur looks like even now. It has about 82 water bodies, many of them interconnected, draining into a very large lagoon and emptying into the sea through an estuary. What we're doing now is to construct a 4,000 megawatt power plant over here. So when I want to construct this power plant, I will have to bring up the elevation. So this is west to east, this is the Bay of Bengal. And the land slopes from the west to east. You have about 20 meters at this contour, and you have about 1 meter over here. So I'm constructing something over here. If I want to protect myself, I have to raise the height to about 6 meters, which means I have a dam the size of 6 meters. In this year's what is called heavy rains, when I went to this village and asked them, so how have the rains been? They said not enough. We need more rains so that water can rise by at least 1.5 feet so that these irrigation tanks can start supplying water for irrigation. That's the amount of rainwater holding capacity that this place has. And once you do this, you're going to expose people with flooding over here. But what is more dangerous is you're locating at a 20-meter contour, you're locating a ash pond where the ash from the coal power plant will be dumped. And this contains all kinds of nasty chemicals that will come flowing down. Similar thing is being done on the northern side with our backwaters that's being filled up as part of our Make in India campaign. Actually, as part of Make in India campaign, here's a massive port. They dredge the material and dump it on the backwaters. So with every little bit of Make in India, we have a little bit of unmaking in India. So India gets unmade bit by bit. And we're currently challenging this, and we hope to kind of prevail upon the government to stop. We've stopped it from happening, but now we got to get them to dig it up and restore the waterways. This is the Buckingham Canal. This was the Buckingham Canal, but now it's a highway to hell. So you have it completely filled up. There's no water over here. There were 2.5 kilometer stretches just disappeared. So this is something that faces everybody. If you go to the Paris Convention, people are talking about how we can continue to grow, but we'll grow in a green manner. We will have green businesses. We'll have green consumption. We'll have little green people running around. So in this whole thing, we're talking about how there must be a balance between environment and development. And there is a certain kind of an expectation, a tacit kind of a statement that the environment will have to do a little bit of balancing because I have to develop. I have to have better clothes. I have to be well fed. But all these things are justified. The fact of the matter is the environment will not do any balancing. So if you can't find a way to work within the parameters of the environment to feed everybody and clothe everybody, you might have to have people that are unfed and unclothed. So that is the essential point that I would like to make with this. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'd like to go to the first part of your talk, for the Koreatown story. You obviously mentioned important pit stop starting from 2001 when the factory was closed in 2007 when the bad report came out, 2011 when the good report came out, and 2015 when the video came out. And, so I'm just curious. First question is, what was happening in those intervening years, and we talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, what is happening in the intervening years with one, I think that there was an attempt to try and break the Pollution Control Board's refusal to open up the process for consultation. Second, we prevented a bad thing from happening, where in secret the Pollution Control Board had diluted the standards. So let me start here. When the factory closed down, they immediately commissioned a report. And before anybody could say anything, they said, we will clean up the factory and it will be cleaned up to a standard of 10 milligrams per kilogram, which means 10 milligrams of mercury will be left behind in every kilo of soil after the cleanup is done. And this would be a good standard for future residential use. And our point was that this is not a residential area, even though you can use it for residential purpose. You have to look at it as a forest area because it's ecologically contiguous to with a forest. And it has to be brought down to background levels, is what our contention was. So when this contention was made very forcefully, the Pollution Control Board shut us out. When I say us, I'm talking about public, out. And that was in 2005. Then by 2007, the company had commissioned another one of those spineless expert organizations called NERI to prepare a report. And in that report, rather than bring down or make the standard more stringent, the consultant argued to make the standard more lenient at 25 milligrams per kilogram, citing techno-commercial considerations and saying that the possible benefits that accrue are not commensurate to the cost of an enhanced cleanup. And what they did not say is that the benefits accrue to me and the cost is to you, the polluter. That has not been said. But this is the logic that has been used, and the Pollution Control Board approved the standard with the help of what they called a scientific experts committee, a bunch of scientists drawn from different disciplines, from different institutes, who were brought in as a rubber stamp. And so when the public said we would like to be in, they said, don't worry, this is not for you, this is all about high science. Let the experts decide. And so this was done. Between 2007 and 2010, we were able to unearth this information through one of the few useful laws called the Right to Information Act. And we were able to put together a report called Double Standards Highlighting Unilever's Environmental Racism. Subsequently, the license that was granted to Unilever was cancelled, was revoked in 2010. And so that is one piece of work that is going on. This other piece of work is, of course, bringing together information about workers' health, trying to get medical evidence, gather medical evidence, trying to get other experts. We have not been able to get anybody to come and do a study for us because this kind of expertise, not expertise, but this kind of resources are not there with people like us. And so only companies can afford those kinds of resources. So it was never done. The government also did not do it. But that was the attempt for about 10 years. They were gathering a lot of information, we're doing a lot of campaigning, but nothing was visible. We went to the annual shareholders meeting in Bombay. We had campaigns done in Kodaikanal. We had cycle rallies and different things. But because it was invisible, it did not really matter. It was just wasted effort. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to contrast two cases from the very first example and the second one. First one being the podcast. So in the first one, your opinion was, or I perceived your opinion was that the government intervention actually messed up the negotiation effort or the compensation effort. And the second one, you had an interesting objective for the government, which was basically like surprisingly they produced a report which then kicked in the process. What changed? Is it the fact?
No idea. I think that the group of people that they sent over there finish.
So I'm just trying to understand what is it that primarily changed? Is it the stakes for Unilever as a giant company which sells a lot of products to the Indian market? The stakes could be a lot higher if this word got out. And why hasn't the government just gone out to get them a scruff of the neck and said, clean up, otherwise you're not selling anything, like what happened in Maggie?
I don't know why Maggie happened. That's an aberration. That's not the world. That's not the way the world is supposed to run. So if the government does something that actually benefits the people, ask them why. If they don't ask them why, because that is the way the government is set up. It is not. It is not a government that functions for the people. It is not in your country. It is not in mine. So in the case of, I'm saying it's not in America. It is not in India. In the case of the Government of India committee report, the report was commissioned by the Department of Labor, and they chose a bunch of people. I have absolutely no reason, no understanding of why they gave an honest report. That, I could probably explain to you why they did give a dishonest report if they'd given. The fact that they gave an honest report makes me wonder why it happened. I don't think it was because the government was offended by Unilever or anything like that. There's no such, bad blood between the government and Unilever. The second one as to why the government has not done anything, it's the same thing as in Bhopal. I think that beyond that report, there has been absolutely no intervention from the central government. The state government has not intervened even in terms of a report. On the contrary, on the environmental issue, the state government has has worked actively with the polluter, which kind of, we are more comfortable with that because that's what we expect and that's what we know how to deal with. So the inaction of the government is because there is a corporate capture. And ideologically, I think that they are one with a lot of people, like, the Pollution Control Board's chairperson. I don't think he's a corrupt person or anything, but he does not see this as a problem. He does not understand the seriousness of mercury. So it's like, they're saying 20 milligrams. So, let them do it. It's okay. Why are you insisting on a very high quality? Just take what you get.
Can I just add something? My wife and I were just recently visited for about last month. And we were told by the director of the clinic, and this is apparently documented, that when the settlement was being negotiated between the government of India and the government of Madhya Pradesh and Union Carbide, that the message came through directly. There was a messenger, which was Tata, who was on the World Bank board, who was told directly by Henry Kissinger, listen, you better settle for what we're offering you, which is $800 per person settlement, or America has no interest in investing in the country. It was as bully boyish as that.
This seems to be like the case of the economic hit, right?
Yeah, but this is in writing.
In writing.
Yeah.
In this case, I don't think there's been done. This is too small an issue. Now I think there's a lot more attention, but at the time that the government was not acting, there's no need to act because it is not in limelight.
Just going further ahead, what do you see the role as? Because, I understand, now coming to the third part of your talk, which is about enact, right? So this is clearly a town planning issue, but what do you see your role as?
No, I think that
would you like to be in this agitation or awareness creation role? That's like the Kejriwal before he's winning his election vote? Or would you like to partner up with some government agency to actually advise them on how to go ahead and do things?
No, I think that the agitational mode is better for me. Okay. And I think that other people would be able to fill in the partnering with the government mode or with anything. I don't have any problem with that, but I have a fundamental problem with seeing this as a town planning issue. It is not a town planning issue. It is a fundamental problem with the way you define development, with the way you define prosperity or goodness or well-being, how you promote that. If you have a growth-led development model, this will happen in India, it will happen in South Africa, it will happen in America. It will happen. It does not matter how well you plan, because planning is done by a bunch of engineers. It's not an engineering problem. There's a philosophical, ethical problem to this. And engineers cannot address that matter. They can probably figure out a way to drain the water quickly, but they're not going to be able to change our culture, which believes that this is the only way for the well-being of human society. So I think there's a far more, and that's why I think that, I would rather be in an agitational mode. I don't have to be seen as a person who offers solutions. I would like to, first of all, figure out what it is that you're trying to solve. Do you know what you're solving? You don't have your question right. You jump into providing answers and say, I'm still searching for the questions, and maybe get more people to look for the questions. And in the meantime, yes, I think that there would need to be a lot of patchwork done, because it is not as if, the thing is that this disaster, the Chennai floods, actually allowed people to talk about things that they would never dare talk about. In India, we can now have a meeting about just to criticize growth. You can have an anti-growth meeting. You might be called an anti-national, but you actually have the space, and people will actually come for such a meeting and listen. And so I'm saying this is not a third world problem. It is a problem that is, a problem of the modern world. It's a problem of the industrial model, and we are seeing this time and again. It's just like saying climate change is a matter of energy, which is what we're all seeing from the people who are campaigning on coal. Keep the coal in the ground. Climate change, such a complex problem, has been converted into an energy problem. Energy problem has been converted into an electricity problem. Electricity problem has been converted into a coal problem. So they say now if we change this coal to renewables, then the whole world will be smiling and everything will be running on windmills and solar. Essentially, you're saying you're going to run an inherently unsustainable economy on sustainable energy. I think that is a ridiculous notion. I would rather power it with nuclear power and get it over with much quicker. Because your model is unsustainable, and that needs to be changed. That requires a lot. It requires poets and artists and social scientists more than engineers. Engineers come and actually distract and provide you with a red herring, which actually completely complicates issues. I studied engineering, so I have a right to criticize engineers.
You said at one point that water has a memory, and it goes to places where it has gone. And the problem is that sometimes those places have been taken up in ways that they shouldn't be. And so one of the things I think I came away with was that water has a memory, but the development enterprise has no memory, right? That there's a kind of willful forgetting of past disasters, right? In the name of growth, in the name of expertise, in the name of development. And so, can institutions, right, like governments, or even institutions like universities which produce experts, do they be made to have a memory? Or is it only people, right, say global civil society, if you want to call it that, that has the responsibility of holding this memory of past disasters and leveraging that memory for whatever, for positive political ends. Because this is a transnational problem, as you said. This is not something which can be located in the third world. Right? It's located in the third world for ideological reasons, but it doesn't really bear out if you look at the evidence. And much of the best work that's been done for environmental justice has been done transnationally, right? Through the sharing of memories, through the sharing of certain kinds of struggles. So I wonder if you could say something about the role of global civil society, right? And how you see how do we sustain memories of past disasters, and can we really not use them to hold institutions to account? I mean, is there no possible relationship between people who are suffering, activists who are in some ways spokespersons, and institutions which ultimately are doing the damage, right? There's got to be some kind of relationship. And it could be an oppositional one. But
no, I think that one, yes, I mean, the memories do travel. It's not just among global civil society. I think even within the academia, there is a lot of, when I painted the academia with a brush, it's not as if everybody in academics is like that. I mean, if things are still working in India, it is because of enlightened people who are speaking out despite the oppressive nature of the ambience. And so there is that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of expertise. Actually, in Chennai, if I look at the Public Works Department, which is entrusted with the maintenance of water bodies, or Metro Water, which is entrusted with the drinking water and sewage evacuation. Engineers within these departments, I subsequently found out, had given prescriptions and suggestions to the government, which were fantastic. I mean, not necessarily challenging growth issues, but then what he was talking about, just in terms of even minimizing impact, how do you build a town that does not get slapped silly. So there were very, very rational suggestions that were given. What happens is just like what happened in Bhopal. You had a design engineer from the US who says, don't make a large tank for MIC. MIC is really a strange character, cannot be controlled, will escape, requires tremendous control, and one slip up and you will mess up. So the engineer actually over there was a person with integrity who gave his advice or her advice to the management. The management takes a financial decision. It's a risk assessment. What is the risk of this happening? Which is a kind of a quantifiable risk. If you're a statistician, you can put a number to it. And then what is the risk of that occurrence hurting you? That again becomes an understanding. You have to have an understanding of the political system, about how amenable they are to pressure, whether you have Henry Kissinger on your side. And based on this, you make a decision saying that this is an acceptable risk for me, not for the Bhopalis. As a company, it is acceptable. In the same way, over here, when you have these recommendations, you are up against the political class, which has a 5-year memory. Whatever they have to do has to be done in 5 years. They can't plan something for your future generation. They have to plan something for your next 3 years, for your next 4 years. And next 3 to 4 years, what I can concretely show is concrete. I can put something out there and say, here is what I've done. And so there you have a huge problem, because most of these projects take 15 years. From the time that you conceive it, somebody else, you come up with this brilliant idea, and then the opposition party comes and unveils it and takes all the credit and goes. So you have, this is a fundamental problem, because, and this is not just over here, it is all over the world. If you look at it, there is one of the reasons why business and politics are unable to live up to the pressures of the time is because their vision is very narrow. They're not even looking, 100 years is not even there in their, leave alone eternity. But even 100 years is not there, even 50 years is not there. You're looking at short cycles. For the corporations, it is your next shareholders meeting must be successful. You need to have posted something. For a government, it's about 5 years. So I think that there is a mismatch between our needs as a society and the structures that we have set up.
I just have a quick comment on that. I think this is not a problem specific to India. I think this is like a proper development trajectory that we kind of see for any country that's trying to industrialize. That's just I'm just putting that as a comment. Second thing is, I think a lot of this will change with the amount of education and social mobility that you'll see with population. Because part of the reason why you mentioned like now it's okay to have a conversation in India about anti-development or like stop growing at this pace is part of the transition that you see with people now having basic needs to actually talk about more things they want. So I think this is something that you're taking a snapshot over a very short time, so you kind of feel very actively pregnant about. But if you kind of spread out the lens a little bit, I think you can plot a lot of countries that have gone through similar things.
Yeah, I don't think this is a matter of evolution, because if you're evolving, there has to be an endpoint. I don't know what the endpoint is, what we're developing towards. The second point I would like to make is that the people who talk sense are usually not educated. And I think that in this case, at least, a case can be made out that prosperity, not poverty, is the problem. Prosperity is a huge problem. If you look at Chennai or any of the Indian cities, yes, you have what is called development, which means income levels have gone up, expendable income has gone up, and certain amount of standard of living is up. But you also, there's one of the closest correlations to GDP is the amount of garbage you generate. So the more developed you are, the more you are able to speak about a number of things that on a philosophical level, it means what you're saying is that you will have to be generating a shitload of garbage. And that garbage also played a huge role in this. And now in the floods, because of the way it clogged up, no country has solved this problem. They keep pointing, no, when I was again, they pointed it out as if it's a third world problem. Garbage is a third world problem. Garbage is a third world problem because that's where it finally ends up. Garbage has not been solved. There is not a single industrialized society on this planet that is potty trained. Right? So we move our waste from one place to another. People who do it very effectively, or you tend to make it disappear. You can dig a hole in the ground and bury it. You can send it to Bangladesh. You can make it disappear. You can fire it up in an incinerator, you can make it disappear, but you actually have ended up spreading the waste over a much larger area. So that part of it has not been figured out. So I'm saying that the danger is if this trajectory is actually acquired. But if we actually become developed, then I think we have done the wrong thing. Because right now we're taking the trajectory as if that is the only, there's a linear way. And that linear trajectory will mean that you industrialize, lift everybody. That is not happening. The evidence is very clearly against that. That people, the bulk of the people are going down. Informalization is extremely high. And insecurities are very high in terms of job. But the amount of dollar billionaires has gone up from 8 to 54. So yes, there is prosperity. And that prosperity, I think, is a curse.
I've never been in such a solid traffic jam as in Chennai.
Really?
It was bad. I mean, all the IT people, I guess, going home Friday at 5 o'clock. It was But also, I just wanted to tell everyone that Ben & Jerry's is now owned by Unilever. So if you want to say something when you next get your Ben & Jerry's, say they should be paying attention.
You can have a Mercury Faluda.
It seems like one of the issues that I guess feeds into all these disasters that have been created, and even systemically, is just this notion of like a misaligned incentive, or just understanding what are the incentives that drive growth. And so in so many cases with these large corporations, the incentive is purely financial, right? And so once you get to the higher levels, there has to be a decision that's made that's based purely on returns to the people in charge. And so, in one sense, when these disasters come up, like the Kodaikanal example that you gave, then that video was amazing, and in some sense tries to exploit that incentive, because if you're concerned purely about the bottom line, then this creates a bad image and it hurts your bottom line, right? I guess my question is, obviously changing the incentive structure is a much larger problem. It's a hard problem. What do you think we can do to try and either try to push changes to the incentive model, or try to exploit the incentives further?
No, I think that the trying to exploit in the incentive model will give you, so that means that for every corporation I have to have a separate rap video made. And then that is not going to happen. Right? So that is the thing. This thing, yesterday we were talking about whether this is really a victory. And you want to say something, Aaron?
No.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about whether this is really a victory. In a sense, of course, we feel very elated because victories are very hard to come by. This is probably going to be the only one I see in my lifetime in terms of this kind of corporate campaigning. I'm not being, cynical or whatever. I'm just saying, based on a 15-year, 25-year, history of fighting, these kinds of things don't happen very often. But when they happen, of course, one is overjoyed. But also, what is very stark is that would this kind of campaign have to be done for everything? Yeah. So the issue is that, yes, I think that the harder problem is the one. So I'm part of an anti-corporate collective, and this is what we're talking about. So even in this one, where the company lays claim to responsibility, lays claim to human values, in the cloak of its personhood, that has to be challenged. The notion of a responsible corporation has to be challenged. And I think that I'm not saying that corporations are evil creatures, but they're not designed to be doing public good. That is not the intention of a corporation. So if you should not be expecting that. If you want to expect that, then make something else. But if I tinker with a corporate structure sufficiently to make it publicly accountable and for the public good, it will no longer be a corporation. That is acceptable to me. But I think that needs to be done. But for that, we need to reclaim our democracy. Right now, the lawmaking and everything is sold. When we go around voting, and then finally, when our people go there, they do the work for somebody else. So there is a very fundamental need for changes in different levels, and that I think can come by working with young people, because a lot of older people are they get scared. I mean, it scares me definitely. That if what I say scares me sometimes, to say that this lifestyle is not going to be sustainable. So if you really want to talk about human rights, then you have to let go of your addiction. This addiction cannot be let go easily. It requires, like Alcoholics Anonymous, we sit down as a Consumers Anonymous and talk about all the things that we have purchased without really needing it, and try to figure out ways of letting go. And so at a societal level, it can possibly done. Not everybody is going to become a Mahatma, but on a societal level, I think that there are possibilities of changing, and that is where we need to get towards.
I just want to add one thing about the short-sightedness. It's not just the corporate system or the political system. As humans, we have this bias where we discount the future. Till 200 years ago, the average age was about 38 for humans. So we don't have really, we have a cognitive bias towards a very long-term thinking or planning anyway. So that also inherently finds us, most of us are not even aware of it. It's kind of the reason why the exam's far away, you don't study, right? You discount your future for immediate fun all the time. It's a bias that we have. It's very hard to count.
Yeah, I wonder if this bias is also something that is characteristic of modern culture, because in many indigenous cultures, including the Native American culture, they think about the seventh generation. So your planning is done with an eye to the future, and we talk about future as in times when you're not there. And there are moral limits to consumption. So it is not done. What Ajanta had written. Can you probably talk about that? The mechanization, the first opposition to mechanization in Kanyakumari. Don't remember.
What about it?
The artisanal fisher folk opposed it, not out of an environmental opposition, no?
Yeah, because it was about unequal distribution.
Correct. It was a moralistic kind of a thing. That no person should be taking so much from the sea. Not that because that was a time. So this is from a book that Ajanta wrote called Shorelines, and for an academic, it's a book that can be understood. He wrote it very well. So that book actually has a section where it talks about the introduction of mechanized fishing in the western coast of Tamil Nadu in Kanyakumari. And when the mechanized boats were introduced, they would just like scoop up a lot of fish. But at that time, the sea was seen as limitless. It's just like, bountiful and limitless. So it is not a fear that the sea would get exhausted, which there is now. But at that time, it is just an immoral act for any one person to take so much. Why would he need so much? So there was a kind of a resistance to that technology because it took more than what was required. But in the fishing community, that is not there anymore. It has largely been replaced. They're no different from me. In many indigenous societies, there are. So I think it is a cultural issue, which again would need to be dealt with culturally.
I think it's also about whose future you keep in mind. Right? I mean, often people have a very highly privatized understanding of the future. Right? It's about your family and your children. It's not about a societal understanding. It's also about the scale of your imagination.
Yeah.
I don't know, probably a lot of you have read Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything. And this is the discussion she has in her book that she arrives at. And the case studies, I think, would be greatly improved, strengthened with the cases that you're discussing. Which is to do with local organization around specific issues, whether it's contamination or exploitation of resources, etc. But what she's talking about is the power of local political organization and then creating consortiums of localities coming together to actually establish that value system of conserving and having respect and generating equality within communities and across communities.
Right. Yeah, but also I think that there's it should not be seen as a cynical kind of a point of view, but then just as another point of view that there is also a need to probably plan for a post-collapse society. You're looking at the kind of science out there. You're looking at a 3 degrees Celsius. Actually, I'm meaning this is a very hopeful activisty thing to do. If you can't really avert the collapse, then how do you have a sensible post-collapse society? What are the ideas that are around in popular currency? How are those seeded? And how well are people prepared to take that on? That is also something that needs to be thought about. Because left to ourselves as a global body, we don't seem to be doing anything. Nothing has changed. At Paris, we actually committed to a 3 degrees Celsius. And I think in this last 10,000 years of human history, we haven't experienced, we don't know how nature will behave. That is unprecedented. That's really unprecedented. But that's something that we're not even aware of. And if you come to Chennai, or if I go around looking at people, look at how I party and everything else, it seems as if we don't really buy into it. It doesn't scare us on a daily basis. And if it doesn't scare you on a daily basis, you're not going to be able to prepare for it. I just have one more thing. No, I have one small thing that will undepress people. So this is something after having. No, I don't. Share it.
Another book that I just finished is John Thackeray's How to Thrive in the Next Economy, which is on sale in MIT Book Club, by the way. Which is to answer your question, well, to meet your challenge, which is what do you do in the post-crisis?
Right. But what's it called? The book is called
How to Thrive in the Next Economy.
Yeah, which might also happen before the collapse.
Yes, exactly.
So this is a poem that was written by a friend of mine from Bhopal. His name is Satyanath Sarangi. I don't know if you met him. Yeah, it's a poem called Yes. Yeah. Yes, I'm a rabid optimist. For me, every tree that continues to stand, every stream that continues to flow, every child that runs away from home is an indication that the battle is not only on, it is being won. Possibly you will tell me about the nuclear arms race, and all I can tell you is that an unknown child held my hand with love. You will try to draw me into the plateau of practical life. Tell me that not only God, but all the religious and non-religious leaders are dead. And all I can tell you is that across the forest lives a young man who calls the earth his mother. You will give me the boring details of the rise of state power after every revolution. And all I can tell you is that in our tribe, we still share our bread. You will reason with me, and I will talk nonsense like this. Because the difference between reason and poetry is the difference between breathing and living life. I will read poems to you, poems full of optimism, poems full of dreams, and maybe poems better than this one.
So, Nitish leaving to New York tomorrow, and then 3 days after that, he's going to California. So he's going to be giving a talk on March 20th from 3 to 5 p.m. In San Jose. But as part of this trip, Nitish is also hoping to raise some funds for the campaign to continue. As you all know, we reached one milestone in that the ex-workers have been compensated, but the cleanup has not been done. It's like Nikki said, it could be another few years. He may or may not see it in his lifetime, but the campaign will continue and should continue. So if you would like to contribute, then we have an online donation link on the Facebook event. If you need more information, please come down and talk to me. If you want to make a cash or check donation, that would be fine too. But please do continue to support and spread the word. Our campaign has not ended; it has to continue. And thanks for coming. I'm not part of MIT, but on behalf of MIT, I apologize for the death.